Penn State football could go undefeated in 2023, is what a homer might say. Or am I actually being realistic here?
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, you are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every single day. I am Zach Seyko. I'm your host of the show. Become an everydayer. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. And we welcome back Matty Fresh, Matt Freiler, to talk some Penn State football. Can they actually go undefeated in 2023? Some people would whoa, pump the brakes, don't go that far. They got Michigan, they got Ohio State on the schedule. There's absolutely no way a first-year starting quarterback. And I don't know. I look at those Ohio State and Michigan games. Yeah, they're tough, but they're not that scary. And given Ohio State's having a little bit of a three-quarterback battle going on, we know that Drew Allar is going to be the starter here, so it's a quarterback battle, right? In name only, but. I don't know. I don't look at those games and I say, well, there's no way Penn State can win those. They're at home against Michigan, who's definitely the better team. And then Ohio State, I think they're vulnerable this season. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to it here. And that's going to be a good game out in the shoe. But the likelihood that Penn State actually goes 12-0 here, Matt, do you think it's a legit possibility, or do I sound just like a straight homer?
Can you believe we're talking about this? I mean, let me ask you, Zach. I'll kind of answer your question with a question. Are you more fond of the years that Penn State comes in off the radar, kind of like a 2016, even a 2022, unranked in the preseason, and able to achieve new heights for the program? Or do you want this again where it's kind of like 2017, right?
Yeah.
A lot of expectations for that team, and they were kind of unable to deliver in the biggest moment. Now, that was still a very successful team, but yeah, when it comes to this year, I'm stuck on that. I don't know if there's any positive that can come out of expectations like this in the preseason. I'm one who I don't really care about the rankings until Halloween. But yeah, I mean, will they be favored in at least 10 games, maybe 11? Yeah, there's a possibility of that. So
yeah.
When you're looking at the schedule, so many things could happen during the course of the season.
Oh yeah.
What I will say is this team will absolutely be, what would it be, 6-0 or 7-0 going into the Ohio State game? No question.
Yeah. And before I forget, folks, I want people to stick around because we got something fun to tease throughout the show and then at the end. So stay through all the way through the show at the end of the podcast because we got some cool news to share at the end. But Penn State being 12-0, I mean, that's almost at least unheard of, unthinkable with the way that Penn State has fallen short of those expectations. And I'm glad you brought up 2017 because they were 4 points away from being undefeated, but that was a really good team. Just because they ended up going 10-2 does not mean that wasn't the best team that Franklin had up until that point. I think 2023 is a much better team than the 2017, mostly because of the defense. If there's any reason that Penn State does end up being 2020 an undefeated team in 2023 is because of the defense and then the running game to go along with it, because yes, they had Saquon Barkley and then Miles Sanders, but it had gotten away from the point that they could just run the clock out, sit on the football, and basically play keep away from opposing teams. Now they have that again, and they have two guys who can do it. So it's not like, well, one needs a breather, one's unavailable. They have two capable running backs that can be that bell cow late in the fourth quarter to ultimately get a win, something they haven't had in a little bit of time.
Yeah, you're totally right. And that 2017 team, such weird circumstances with the Michigan State rain delay and everything that we go back to. And
But
It's
the
almost
Ohio
like
State game, they should have closed that one
yeah,
out. They had a double-digit lead. It was you gave up on defense 39 points, if I'm not mistaken. It was 39-38.
yeah,
And you let JT Barrett, of all quarterbacks, great dual threat, but you let him run up and down the football field airing it out. Like, come on.
yeah.
Come on. But that in 2017, that defense is what kept them from the glory. This time around, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, you're totally right about the defense, and you kind of got to look at the schedule too. How Penn State has kind of a lull in their schedule.
Yeah.
With at Northwestern, a bye week, a scrimmage against UMass, all that time to prepare for the trip to Columbus.
A preseason game in the middle of the middle of the season, position right, because when we looked at the schedule before they redid it, Ohio State really early in the season, I think it was game 4 for 2023, and it's like, man, that's really quick to turn around and play out in Columbus, and then things got reshuffled, and now Ohio State, one of the biggest games of the year, Michigan, of course, as well. Later in the season, when you can get Drew Allar really situated, I think he's grown up a lot, but still, you want to see how he does through the first 4 games. Illinois is that first road hump. I think they win. Illinois is going to be one of the tougher road games. That still doesn't mean I don't think they win, and I don't care if they win by 1 point or 100 points. It's about getting undefeated to Columbus and then ultimately Michigan. I have more if any game is going to throw off a perfect season, it's Michigan. I really do sit here and believe that they will beat Ohio State. I don't care what the early projections say, that Penn State's almost a 2-touchdown underdog out there. That they were a touchdown underdog when they almost beat them. They ended up losing by 1 point. But I think that Penn State they are underrated. They play Ohio State well on the road, believe it or not.
Yeah, even 2021, I got like Penn State plus 22.5 at kickoff of that game. That was a close game right up until the end, believe it or not. So, yeah, I mean, it's crazy to be talking about 12-0, but we talk about the Franklin era off a bye week, not necessarily great. This year, you get UMass instead, where you're kind of gonna have a lot of chance to iron some things out, maybe. So, yeah, the schedule sets up probably as best as it ever could for that.
Yeah. If this was the season to do it, it is. I think 2024, yeah, you're going to have Drew Allar back. There's going to be first round projections, mock drafts, whatever. Then you'll have Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, Abdul Carter. All your stars will get another year of experience, but I really need to see what the depth chart is going to be like, because for almost every position group, yeah, I have my concerns about cornerback and some other positions, special teams too. But if those are the worst of your problems, saying, well, I don't know who's going to necessarily back up a Kalen King and a Johnny Dixon right away. It's got to have to sort itself out among the younger players. And then you really hope it doesn't come down to any place kicking or some strategic punts, because I feel confident that Penn State's going to have the best red zone offense alongside Michigan, because you need to be able to run the football. Okay, that's how you score inside the red zone, because the distance of field really shrinks. You can't expand your offense. So if Penn State is able to run the rock as effectively as I think they will, then they're going to be one of the most efficient teams inside the 20.
Yeah, good luck stopping that T formation this year with Singleton and Allen in the backfield, 3 tight ends who can all play, I think, with Johnson, Warren, and probably Dinkins. And then that offensive line up front in that formation, being able to have variations of that, being able to audible out of it and split the running backs out wide and get the tight ends out, being able to run counter out of it, being able to run play action out of it. You're right. The red zone offense will be incredible. And credit Mike Yursich for what he's been able to do with the development of that package.
Yeah, and they're going to get really creative. The everydayers know this as well, that Penn State's going to see some new formations. If you remember back to a time, Matt, when Mike Yursich was the OC at Oklahoma State, and he had 2 guys that NFL fans might know a little better and diehard college football fans, but Chuba Hubbard and Justice Hill as your 1-2 punch. And Mike Yursich was not afraid to use them at the same time. We saw a lot last year outside of the T formation. It was a lot of single back sets, whether it was under center, out of shotgun. But I imagine this, folks. Nicholas Singleton to the left, Katron Allen to the right of Drew Allar. You fake it to one, you go to the other, or you fake it to both, and you have an RPO quick slant to Keandre Lambert-Smith, whoever's open. And they're both that. It's not like, okay, well, there's a significant drop off from Singleton to Allen. Like, no, they can both hit you. They can hurt your defense in so many ways.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to have 3 wide receivers on the field all the time when you got running backs and tight ends like this. I mean, the personnel that they're going to be able to mix up 23, 22, it's going to be really cool to see because everybody questions the wide receivers. Well, they make up for that at running back and tight end for sure.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, and that you feel so confident in the tight ends. Maybe you have some make or break players for this season, because if Penn State is going to go 12-0, yeah, it's obvious that Drew Allar having a at least above average season for Penn State to go 12-0. But who are some of the unsung heroes that are going to have to play it out this season? We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first, let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is Nutrafol, brand new sponsor here, part of Locked On. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health anymore. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, just better hair. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, visible thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning, such as stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism through whole body health. Take the first step to visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That is Nutrafol.com/men. Enter promo code LOCKEDONCollege to take advantage of that offer. And Locked On Nittany Lions is your go-to podcast for HappyValleyInsider.com. Check them out for all the latest as the previews keep rolling in. Penn State takes on West Virginia very soon. For everything Penn State football recruiting, as well as we have that update on Jalen Harvey. And I think it's time we tease a little bit of what's to come. Everybody knows Matty Fresh. I mean, he can talk Penn State football, but he can also write about it, put musical lyrics to it, and we got something fun to share at the end of this, something to break too. It's going to be the first time you're hearing about this if you're a Matty Fresh fan. And if you aren't, you're going to be.
Yeah, appreciate the platform to do this. I would have never picked any other podcast out there in the Penn State universe.
Hey,
I'm faithful to Locked On. So yeah, you guys get the exclusive announcement that for the first time since the Jahan Dotson song, I am dropping a Penn State themed track. It is called Nittany Nation. If you can kind of see the little banner over my shoulder here. Yeah. We already got the memorabilia hung up on the wall, but Nittany Nation coming Friday, August 18th.
Yeah.
Just in time for the season. Give it a couple weeks to build us into 2023, which just seems so fun and so exciting. And Zach and I both agree that it is quite possibly the most talented team that James Franklin and regime has ever had. And coming off the highs of the Rose Bowl last year, it just felt right. And this team strikes me as more of a complete entity. And it wasn't right to just pick one guy. And you just touched on the defense. If they're going to get it done this year, it's because of the team. And Nittany Nation, Friday, August 18th, coming out on wherever you get your music.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to it and another great season.
Okay, so you like the song, this team is not just about one player, because we could sit here with the freezing cold, at least not the spicy takes, right? The lukewarm takes that, well, yeah, Drew Allar's got to have a good season, and Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen need to avoid the sophomore slump. That's not fun here. I want to give you the players that really have a larger role on this team. I think one of them's Theo Johnson. Because you mentioned that Penn State doesn't need the wide receivers out on the football field necessarily all the time. The reports continue to come in, and I get to see this observing practice. Theo Johnson is 6'6", 260 pounds, and he moves like he's 50 pounds lighter, if you can believe that. So do believe the hype when people say that Theo Johnson is going to be that next Penn State tight end that's taken very early, someone who could ultimately be selected in the first round, I believe, in an upcoming NFL draft here. I predicted, and I get my confidence grows by this every single time I think about it, that he could be a double-digit touchdown scorer for Penn State because Drew Allar comes in. The chemistry, Dante Cephas is going to be better later in the season than he is at the beginning of the season. Okay. And Drew Allar, I think, is going to rely a little more on the consistency of Keandre Lambert-Smith and Theo Johnson, who he's worked with. But just when I see some of those personal quarterback workouts, Theo Johnson's typically the one that has, it's not to say that Keandre Lambert-Smith doesn't want to work with Allar, but I've seen Theo Johnson in more of those highlight videos from practice above anybody else as a target. So I'm going to go Theo Johnson really is the one that will take this offense a step forward, and they will make the season rather than break it.
Yeah, when it comes to like impact guys that, could decide the fate of Penn State's season, obviously Drew Allar is 1A, right? There's no question there.
Yeah.
I actually was going Theo too. So great minds think alike there. I mean, how could you not say Theo? And credit to James Franklin and the staff for giving him the opportunity to bounce back from a little bit of adversity earlier on this year where he was involved in a little bit of a scuffle at an off-campus party. But seems like bounced back well. He's getting some accolades throughout the spring. They seem very high on him, and it seems like he was, able to bounce back from that in a very productive and positive way. So, that's great that they were able to manage that situation. But, yeah, if you're going Johnson, I'll go Warren, right? Like Tyler Warren, a guy who can be used in so many ways, played the quarterback position throughout high school.
As a freshman and played in that Wildcat formation as a true freshman.
Right. Like weird things you can do with that. Last year we saw Keandre Lambert-Smith throwing a pass. So very versatile guys on this offense. And you're right. The tight ends, I think my bold prediction will be a tight end. And I think it would probably be Johnson, but it could be Warren. A tight end will lead Penn State in receiving this year. Touchdowns and yardage.
Okay, so yeah, yardage I could see more of a Keandre Lambert-Smith or a Dante Cephas just because that's the way that Mike Yurcich's offense is set up. The volume in the passing attack is to go. But I just feel like Drew Allar is going to be – it's hard not to be comfortable with someone who is too athletic for linebackers to cover and too big for safeties or try to maybe match up a corner. You stick Theo Johnson in the slot and run up a seam – I really don't think of the whiteout game with Minnesota, but over and over and over again.
Yeah, seriously. And you wonder if Drew Allar will kind of latch on to Theo. I know sometimes quarterbacks have their guy. For Sean, it started out with KJ Hamler, turned into Jahan Dotson. And, he had a little thing with Parker, but it didn't seem like it was, as special as the connection with KJ and Jahan was. Yeah. And then going into this year with Drew, I just feel like this is, we come out West Virginia week and 11 different guys catch a pass. And I feel like, Keandre Lambert-Smith is the top receiver in this room, but there's so much talent that I feel like 4 or 5 guys could get near 500 yards, depending on the passing volume. And then, like if Theo Johnson can break out like a 800-900 yard season, does this team necessarily have to have 1,000-yard receiver with all the running they're going to do with the football? I don't know. You're going to have a lot of games too, probably where they're up in late game situations and you want to run the ball there. So I think that you're right. It's Theo and it's Warren. I mean, those guys are massive to this operation this year, but you got to have the depth as well. And I think with guys like Dinkins and Jerry Cross and some of the newcomers, I think that there's some surprises that are going to be had. And hey, Drew Allar threw his first ever touchdown pass to Dinkins, I believe. So pretty cool there.
And he threw one to Theo Johnson as well. Theo Johnson had 4 touchdown receptions a year ago, and one of them was from Drew Allar late in a garbage time situation. But still, that chemistry is there, and that's my point. If I'm going to name one more person on the offense that, again, is a little more off the cuff, an unsung hero, it's going to be Drew Shelton. Because Drew Shelton, even though he's not going to start, Olu Fashanu dealt with injuries last season. Is he going to play all 12, 13? 14 games, maybe, right? If Olu needs a break, right? And part of the reason if players are able to make it through a full schedule is the depth behind them, because then they don't have to go a million miles an hour when they're really exhausted. You can rotate guys in and still feel pretty comfortable with what you're trying to do offensively and defensively. So I'm going to go Drew Shelton because he can swing to either side of the offensive line. He can back up Olu. He was pushing, at least in spring camp, Caden Wallace. Now it sounds like from James Franklin, at least at his latest post-practice presser, can't believe I said that perfectly and didn't get tongue-tied, but Drew Shelton was pushing Wallace once upon a time, and now Wallace has settled in to the starting right tackle role for this season once again. But Shelton he'd start anywhere else at either position, left tackle or right tackle. So I know it's boring, offensive lineman, but I'm serious. He's going to be critical to how successful Penn State can remain along the offensive line.
Yeah, it's crazy how mature and poised Drew Shelton is too. I remember hanging out at the team hotel after the Rose Bowl in LA and just kind of walking up to some of the players. And I really thought Drew Shelton was like an upperclassman. In fact, I thought he was Juice Scruggs. And the way he carried himself, he's like, "Oh, I'm not Juice, I'm Drew." I'm like, "You're Drew Shelton?" Like, you would never think he's not like goofing around with the rest of the underclassmen, and like he's not the loudest guy in the room. But man, what a presence, like, for just like an 18 or 19-year-old kid. So that's another good pick. If we're going defensive side of the ball, I think Zachy Wheatley is a huge one. You're going to need somebody to replace Tig Brown, right? And I think when you look at Joey Porter, I think Penn State's okay at corner. Maybe I'm a little more confident in Johnny Dixon than some others and Daquan Hardy. But safety's a weird one. Okay. When you're looking at Wheatley and Reed and Ellis, and then obviously KJ Winston doing some big things in camp, but which one of those guys can replace Tig Brown? Yeah, I don't know, because he stepped up and replaced Jaquan Brisker pretty well, and now you're going to need another guy to complete that secondary. I do think this is the best secondary in the country. I've said that a couple times on a couple different podcasts. I know you have questions at corner. I think Zachy Wheatley is a dog. I think he's going to end up being an all Big Ten selection for sure. We saw flashes from him even as early as week 1 last year, forcing that fumble against Purdue. Huge play in that game. Yeah. And I'm pumped about him. He's super long, and he's really athletic, and he's got all the intangibles. And I think he's a guy who could be a ball hawk and kind of replace Tig Brown a little bit.
I think Penn State, if they want to, they don't necessarily have to put 3-4 cornerbacks on the field at the same time. They could go 3 safety if they wanted to. Maybe shift Keaton Ellis down into more of a man-to-man role on third down, and then that way you roll in, because there is a lot of depth at safety. Now, James Franklin said this, not me, but I agree with him, and I'm going to agree with head coach here. Unprovoked said that we have a lot more guys, but we don't have necessarily as much talent. So you can only play 11 people on the field. And if you have Zachy Wheatley, Keaton Ellis, KJ Winston, Jalen Reed, okay, what combination of those guys? You're not going to have 4 safeties all at the same time, but I could easily see them going Kalen King, Johnny Dixon on the boundaries, having Zachy Wheatley over the top as basically this freelance ball hawk safety in the center field, and then do something with a combination of Jalen Reed and Keaton Ellis, because while they don't have linebacker size, I feel comfortable putting them on tight ends because they have the athleticism to go along with it.
I heard some rumblings of this. Is Christian Driver officially a wide receiver?
He is.
Yep, he is.
Okay. Wide receiver.
Because that's another guy I was going to mention defensively.
Yeah.
But, wow. I mean, that's a deep wide receiver room. But, yeah, he's another guy offensively that might have a breakout. I think that he's got the genes to do it. But, yeah, I mean, Wheatley.
Driver, yeah.
I think Wheatley could be a star this year in that defensive backfield.
If Penn State's defense is going to be complete, I've said deny Dennis Sutton. Again, this is an obvious. I'm talking about players that make or break, that set Penn State over that. They're no longer this 10-2 team and third in the Big Ten, right? 10-2 being third in the Big Ten is not good enough here. They got to go at least 11-1 and make it to the Big Ten title game. Okay, that's the expectations here. Those are the goals. At 12-0 would be nice. If you're looking for someone, a couple guys to put Penn State over the top here, Zane Durant has to take a step, or Jordan Vandenberg. One of the two at the defensive tackle spot really needs to become a disruptor in the middle. Okay, defensive tackle has caught a lot of flack just for there haven't been enough playmakers at that position. PJ Mustipher did enough, but like I said, not enough playmakers. Okay. That's one guy I could name from a year ago. I know Hakeem Beamon, Devon Elise are going to start the season, but Zane Durant is expected to take that next step forward. I would naturally mention Denai Dennis Sutton, but I feel like Kobe King needs to get a little more love here. Abdul Carter, Curtis Jacobs, we know how good they're going to be. They're all Big Ten candidates. Curtis Jacobs has been talked about as a top 5 draft pick for linebackers, a top 5 draft prospect for the linebacker position. But I don't think Kobe King's getting enough love as that Mike linebacker.
Yeah, I've always kind of seen this year's defense as a 4-2-5. So I was going to ask you about that third linebacker and how much you think that third linebacker will be on the field with this package. And obviously sometimes they run Prowler with a 6th defensive back. Mm-hmm. And if it is a lot of 4-2-5, which it could be, who's that defensive back that's rushing the passer? We saw a number of guys do it last year. Johnny Dixon did it a lot. Tig was just awesome rushing the passer. But who's that guy, right, that's going to have a couple of sacks as a DB, like kind of like a Jonathan Sutherland kind of swing role? But yeah, you're right with Kobe King. There's no reason Kobe King can't be as great as his brother. No reason at all. Yeah. And I think that it's just tougher to transition to that position out of high school than it is as Mike linebacker than corner. But there's absolutely no reason that Kobe can't be as great as Kalen. I know Kalen's getting all the first round draft love and all that, but trust me, there's that guy's inside of Kobe King too. And he might get his this year. I mean, I just don't know how much that third linebacker is going to be on the field.
It is a Locked On Nittany Lions. Now, Penn State has all the things put together, but last time we discussed, Matt, it was the Big Ten seemed pretty set in stone, or at least that Oregon, Washington, or anybody else wasn't going to join for quite some time. And it feels like every time we do a podcast together, it resets. So in this final segment, let's talk about, just get your thoughts on Oregon and Washington. The everydayers know that I'm not a fan of it. I don't think Penn State, unless you go get Notre Dame, Clemson, Florida State, you're not going to take an odd number of teams. But I don't like a situation where Penn State doesn't benefit, okay? If the more teams you add that don't have as much cachet, Oregon and Washington have the bare minimum when it comes to profile, when it comes to markets. They have just enough to say, okay, Penn State can still get that large chunk of money from the Big Ten. But if you're going to subtract from that $100 million, it's only going to be a few million. That doesn't matter. That is a lot of money that you can use for other programs in the athletic department, okay? So if Oregon and Washington take away from the total number for Penn State, I'm not a fan of it. I'm sorry. I'm just not. It makes it more exciting college football, but I want every Penn State program to be at the top. And now Penn State is able to devote those resources to wrestling, women's basketball, other sports, right, that are a pinnacle for Penn State, but not necessarily getting as many resources that they can now with the new Big Ten contract and the way that Pat Kraft is just steering this ship. But unless they get Notre Dame, Florida State, Clemson, and somebody else to go along with the Fighting Irish, I really don't want anybody else in the Big Ten. But that's just me. Yeah,
as a college football fan, this is repulsive. It's sick.
It takes away tradition. Yeah.
And I get it. Maybe as, at the Big Ten office, as the commissioner of the conference, as a university administrator, as a business person, I guess it makes sense. And I guess that's why they unanimously voted the schools in. But yeah, as a fan, it just sickens me. Like, I can't even load up NCAA 14 anymore and actually add the amount of teams to the Big Ten. Like, there's actually a limit of 16 teams you can add. And that's a customizable video game that didn't even anticipate this. So it's just funny. But yeah, I mean, I was kind of accepting that USC and UCLA came in when that 2024 schedule came out, and it said USC was coming to Beaver Stadium in 2024. I just got excited about, like, okay, here's the positive. Here's the silver lining.
Yeah.
This is going to be, like, obviously before our lifetime, but I hear a lot of stories from my dad and other alumni how when Penn State came into the Big Ten in '93, they were the outsiders, and like all the original members wanted to start a new rivalry. And there's just that storyline and that narrative. I kind of want that. I kind of want now, like, Penn State's like, we got initiated, like, we've won a conference title 2, 3, like, become one of the top members of the conference in football. Now I want that. I want to be like, oh, USC doesn't know what it's like to play a Big Ten schedule. They're going to go from this college football powerhouse to a 7-5 perennial team.
Yeah.
UCLA and Oregon, like, good luck making a bowl game with this schedule. Like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to, like, not beat the drum like the SEC does, but I do, as a Penn State fan, have a little bit of pride in what we've been able to accomplish in the last, 28, 29 years in the Big Ten, I guess 30 now. And I do. I kind of like the idea of, like, Oregon coming in and us, like, talking trash to their fans and being like, you don't know what it's like to play in a Big Ten environment. Like, I don't know. So, there's a silver lining there. Otherwise, it's just me trying to reason with these people who seem, I like what Josh Pate said on his show about how it seems like people that are making decisions in this business are average. They're not people that are really qualified to be making these kind of decisions. And this is what happens when people are just focused on their own promotion instead of the integrity of the sport.
Well, who's deciding this? It's not the people who run these conferences in college football. It's the television networks. It's ESPN. It's Fox, CBS, NBC, any combination of them. So you can see why ESPN, who has rights with the Big 12, all of the rights to the SEC, want those schools to merge and to continue to build up that brand. You can see why the Big Ten is focused on taking away schools from the Pac-12, because that's where, before, up until this year, before it's going to get disbanded, they're taking away from ESPN's thing. So this isn't a battle of conferences of who can basically imperialize who. It's Fox versus ESPN. It's Fox versus Disney owns ESPN. It's basically Fox versus Disney here. That's who's deciding the outlook of college football. But again, there's more at stake to this. The Everydayers remember the 2-part show that we did to this, and I'll link that in the description, actually, so people can watch it, because our thoughts still hold true. The goal, it's the enemy of my enemy is my friend, okay? And the people in college football, the football programs, the athletic programs, they want to break away from the NCAA. They want to be almost independent together. So this is about college football. It makes the most money. It has the biggest, I've said it already, cachet. College football is the reason that a lot of the other athletic programs are able to survive monetarily. So what they're going to form is a big a national college football league with probably the top 60 programs, I would say. And you're going to get basically 3 conferences of the Big Ten, the SEC, and some merger of the Big 12 parts of the ACC is going to break up and go to the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12. And those 3 conferences will all get new names. And you'll basically have 3 conferences of about 20 schools each or so, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But that's what you're going to get. And that's going to be the National College Football League. And then they're going to have their own playoff. They're going to do their own thing, because the NCAA was really stuck in its ways with the big reason was the college football playoff.
Yeah, and I do think that 15, 20 years from now, people will be sick of this. And there will be another
it'll be
change.
Unrecognizable. Absolutely unrecognizable.
I kind of like what Chip Kelly said, where he said, well, if you're going to do this, let's just do it. And let's make it divisions like the NFL. I mean, why not have, like you said, the 3 major conferences, split them into divisions where you can at least maintain your geographical rivalries, your traditional rivalries, the pageantry of some of these games. Like, every time we lose, like, even when we lost like Texas A&M, or when you lose even a lower tier one, like a Mizzou against Kansas. Like, I hate losing those games. Like, we're going to lose a lot more with this new alignment. And like, even the Apple Cup, like, somebody made a comment about, the Friday before Thanksgiving, I like turning on and watching Washington State might be the only game I watch of, both those teams that season, but it's important. Oregon State. And I think what used to be called the Civil War, now it's something different, but it produced some great college football memories over the years watching those games. So if you're going to do this, fine, but let's split it up kind of division based so that you have some kind of territorial rivalry going on still.
I mean, I'm a Steelers fan, right? And I hope they have a good season, and I get more excited for the Steelers versus the Ravens. Steelers open up with the 49ers. It's cool to see them play San Francisco because they don't really come into Pittsburgh all that often. But sorry, I look forward to the Steelers playing Baltimore twice a season because of that rivalry, because of that pageantry over someone that's all the way in Santa Clara. Just that's my point of view on it. So Penn State playing Oregon, it's nice because it's new, but honestly, don't forget, these are student athletes, and they're going to have to make these kinds of trips to the West and East Coast, all quarters of the United States. And it really does get complicated. Matt, I always enjoy these discussions. Every single time we go a little longer, but that's okay. I know the everydayers appreciate it. Become an everydayer, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow along wherever you get your podcasts, on X, Twitter at my personal account at Locked On Nittany, and at Matty Fresh TV for Matt Freiler's account as well. And remember, Nittany Nation, his new brand new song is coming out Friday, August 18th, and a little bit of a pun in there if you look at the title too.
Yeah, we just talked about it, right? The T formation.
T formation.
Couple of T's in that name. So let's go. I'm excited about this year.
All right, Matt, I appreciate you coming back on the show, and I appreciate you breaking the big news on this podcast as well. Thanks for the time.
Always, Zach. I'm always a locked on guy, and hopefully you get to have this discussion later on in the season and throughout the season.